Yeah, I feel really very full of barbecue, to be honest. So, yep. But we did it after our total screw up. Sorry, I shouldn't say our, because it wasn't actually you.
Technologically speaking.
Yeah, the major error fail that was the camera overheating, and then our whole amazing conversation.
Yeah, so this is our
lost.
second time trying to vlog, and we got bested by the extraordinary British weather that happened last weekend.
Yeah,
and it's been pretty good this week and this weekend as well.
Yeah, I keep thinking that if I go over to that camera now, it will have switched itself off, and we will, we won't have any footage. But hopefully it'll be all right.
You're a bit paranoid, aren't you? Really, it would seem.
Yeah, I think you can kind of sugarcoat past experience as well, can't you? Because that was such a good conversation that we had, and it seemed such a shame to lose it. But we did, because it was such a sunny day as well, and it was so nice hanging out. Even the drink I had was nice, apple juice. Rather than
can't get much more refreshing than AJ.
It was good.
Yeah.
You got a drink there?
Yeah, I just got my water.
Oh, that looks like a fancy drink, doesn't it?
It does a little bit. It's actually used to be a mouthwash bottle, metal, and I've reused it.
Nice. I thought it was like iced tea or something, but mouthwash. That's cool.
I've got myself some mouthwash water here.
It's quite a cool bottle. That is good.
Yeah, thanks. I use them most weeks. Yeah. They keep the water cool. Does what it needs to do.
So what did we chat about last time?
We chatted about a few things.
We definitely chatted about defund the police. I remember that. But I can't remember.
The police and the BBC.
Yeah. And why the BBC was really biased. But also you thought that the BBC
politics.
Yeah, that's it. It connected with politics, didn't it? And why you thought that the BBC was biased in one way.
Yeah.
And then I thought it was biased in another way. And neither of those were actually opposed to one another or mutually exclusive, were they?
Yeah, you could argue that they might be, but yeah, it's just someone else's viewpoint on the BBC and its internal runnings. Because
you said that when Corbyn was looking to get elected, the BBC's coverage of it was really biased against him. Was that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I felt like they were pretty much it was just they were trying to just shame him so badly. They had it in for him, and they wanted him to suffer in the most embarrassing way possible.
Yeah,
from what I could garner.
Yeah, it's interesting because the other side of it was like the full-blown woke explosion that is the BBC now, and I was saying about. Although was that with political parties? I can't remember. But basically, how biased
I think it was
a
hand-in-hand conversation. Really.
Yeah, it probably was, wasn't it? Just how much the BBC basically pushes a particular. Well, you could say a particular narrative, but I think the thing is, when you say narrative, that's not broad enough because that's just one particular story in a sense, isn't it? But I
guess so. Yeah.
Actually, at the level of worldview, that's actually what they push. So if you read an article, it's not only the assertions that are made positively, but also what lies behind those assertions and what presumptions and presuppositions there are behind those assertions, which is of relevance. And I suppose that reveals somebody's worldview, and it's at that level.
Who's decided that that's the case?
Yeah.
Has everyone just kind of had an informal team meeting and just decided these are the things that we're going to. This is the agenda that we are going to push. And these are the stories, and this is how we're going to tell these particular stories. Yeah.
Even if they've not, I don't know. Even if there hasn't been a specific meeting, a lot of it just happens by osmosis anyway, doesn't it? So I suppose if you were to say, right, let's suddenly create a culture out of nowhere, and within that culture, what we're going to do is we're going to unquestioningly assume that certain things are virtuous. Okay, so we're going to unquestioningly assume that
this thing is correct.
Yeah, that's it. So total personal autonomy is good. We're going to assume, so people should just be whoever they want to be, and there are no boundaries. We should just assume that child abuse is good, and we should assume, yeah. So now we're getting onto sketchy ground, aren't we? Mm. But that's because in our culture we assume that it's not good. Now, as a Christian, I affirm that it's not good, obviously, but I have a basis for that. But let's say that you pick culture where, but total personal autonomy, that's good, and we unquestionably assume that. Child abuse is good, and we unquestionably assume that. Defeating other countries in wars, unquestionably assume that that's just the way it is. And being brave is good as well, in whatever realm, whether that bravery is to do with the bravery of somebody who breaks into a scary person's house to steal stuff off them, or the bravery of a person who escapes from sexual slavery. You know, we'll just say any kind of bravery is good. Imagine that kind of culture where people just assume all these different things, and then you need to go, well, why are those things good? You know, upon what basis, what standard is it that you're appealing to?
What have you got to back up these particular claims that you're giving?
Yeah, totally. So you imagine the newspaper articles in that kind of culture. It would be things like child abuser feels left out because other people won't embrace the way that they want to live, or person who has decided that they are defined by their love of eating charcoal feels ostracised because other people don't want to eat charcoal with them, and they need to create a space where charcoal eaters can hang out and be embraced. Like that's what the headlines would be.
I'm feeling very persecuted because no one wants to be the minister at the marriage between me and my hamster.
Well, kind of. I suppose that, yeah. Yeah. I was staying away from relationships then, but that's fine. Yeah. But a theoretical level, that's absolutely what's happening. That people are unquestioningly assuming that certain things are good and certain things are bad, and they're reporting on them in a particular way, without actually going, well, wait a sec, what standard are we appealing to here?
Yeah, it's a difficult. It's the idea that you are just taking these as the de facto way of living. Human beings having their own autonomy and their own right to individualism and freedom of speech, and that's not something that is generally questioned.
Yeah.
Unless for some shocking reason that it treads on the toes of someone else's individualism.
Yeah, and then is that individual who's had their toes stood upon with their kind of own individualism is offended, are they part of the kind of accepted group of beliefs? So do they belong to,
who has a stronger case to put forward?
Well, not necessarily even case, just like who can make the most noise, who can be the most emotional about it. So like, who can complain the most, who can shame others the most, and then they'll be accepted. So if the child abusers manage to appeal to people's emotions enough about how really they just grew up knowing that they were made for child abuse, and that's,
I never had a childhood or something like that.
Exactly. Then if they can gain kind of public opinion, then that'll be okay. I mean, even as we're talking about this, is totally ridiculous, isn't it? Like, what we're talking about is obviously horrible, and yet the reason that it is horrible is because it's actually against what we were created for, because we're actually created for a reason. We were created for both
loving relationships.
Yeah, well, that's it at its core. And we were created to be in relationship with God and in relationship with one another. and to abuse in any of those relationships, especially the stronger being an adult abusing the weaker being a child here, is totally contrary to the way that God's created us. But people don't. Unless you haven't got that theistic framework, then you end up appealing to something else, don't you? Like, well, everybody knows it's horrible to abuse children.
I think the majority of people could get behind that.
Yeah.
Which is good. They should.
Well, they should do. They should, absolutely. They should do. But I mean, imagine if we were to just go, well, maybe if our fundamental view of the world is, well, actually, to be honest, it doesn't even work. If you do away with God and you just have a materialistic world, stuff just is. Unless you just have a faith-based appeal to like human flourishing or something, which I personally wouldn't. I don't think that's the goal of everything. And I think you have to take that on faith as human flourishing being the best thing. Then it just doesn't work. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud now. Right. So Sam Harris.
That's your style.
Yeah.
That is your style.
Well, that's why I find chatting about these things quite helpful. But do you know Sam Harris?
I've not heard of him, no.
So you got like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, the horsemen.
Yeah. Okay. The super atheist.
The high priest of atheism, yeah, basically. So he wrote a book. Is it called The Moral Landscape? I think it is, but as far as I can remember, in that book, one of the points that he tries to, what he tries to argue for is that it's possible to scientifically establish a system of morality, because that's the big problem.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So that's the big problem that atheists have, and when we say atheists here, specifically those who are going to claim that there is nothing beyond what is physical and what is matter. Those who are purely materialistic in their understanding of the world. So there is no God, and there are no kind of transcendent things, no spiritual realities.
I imagine they're trying to make their own kind of reinvent what is morality and how that looks.
Yeah, well, what they want to do, and at least they're trying to think about it. What they want to do is try to give a scientific basis for morality. Okay. So, and I believe that the argument from Sam Harris is that if you can figure out a metric against which to measure something scientifically, then you can come up with a basis for morality. So, but what happens is that he ends up concluding that human flourishing is the ultimate goal of all moral systems. And here's the idea: if we're able to measure human flourishing, and we can kind of quantify it, then scientifically we must be able to establish what is morally right and what's morally wrong.
Okay. I mean,
but go on.
Yeah, we're quite opposite in that particular sense, that you're an external thinker perhaps, and I'm more of an internal thinker. And
okay.
I've
never been accused of that, but go on.
Yeah, I generally like to think of the words that I'm going to say before I get them out,
right.
Lest the fear of jumbling words and whatnot. Yeah, I'm saying words for the sake of it now, so because I actually can't remember what you were trying to make a point of.
So the idea being that if you can...
So carry on, Andy.
Yeah, that's okay. So if the idea being if you can measure human well-being, you can come up with a way of scientifically establishing moral rightness or wrongness. Okay, so that's born out of a desire to be able to say, well, this is right or this is wrong, when there is no God in that worldview and that system of thought. But the problem is there that you have to start with an entirely arbitrary standard. So why should human well-being, why should human flourishing be the greatest good? Why not what kills more people be the greatest good? Or what leads the strongest to survive? Why shouldn't that be the greatest good? Or why shouldn't the number of people who are around be the greatest good? So he has to assume a standard at the start. That was interesting. I was listening to two really intelligent young atheists. I think one of them's rationality rules, the other one's cosmic skeptic, and they were quite excited about it. One of them especially was quite excited about it because they were like, you could use this in a conversation with people, because you could explain to them how you can make sure that they admit that the goal of any moral system is human flourishing. And what they said was the goal of every moral system is always human flourishing, or in every religion it's always human flourishing. And then if you can do that, well, you can go, well, look, if I can quantify human flourishing, if I could scientifically establish what is propitious or like favourable towards human suffering, then I have a scientific basis for morality. And then if you're an atheist, you go, win, win, win. Well, the problem is that if they were to talk to me, I would go, well, the greatest good isn't human flourishing. The greatest good is the glory of God. Because at the centre of Christianity, whether Christians will tell you it or not, that is the greatest good. It's the glory of God, and human flourishing is a byproduct of that. It's one of the benefits of God's glory being displayed, but it's not the central goal. It's actually God Himself being glorified. Does that make sense? This is a lot of external processing I'm doing here.
Yeah, it's all going on live in the field here.
I think people should know that that's not actually like some kind of distortion or white noise or whatever you can hear in the background. Occasionally there's a little bit of wind, but it's like Tom noticed before, it was the trees making a noise. That's all the trees, the leaves going.
We're currently in a very shady area of Moor Park.
We are.
And we're enjoying the general amusement of the other park goers. A little bit of cricket in the background.
Yeah, Tom's got that behind him.
Have you had people walking past looking amused? Sorry?
Have you had people walking past looking amused behind me?
I haven't actually, no. I've not seen anyone. I don't know if you have.
I just saw a couple of people walking past before, but that's fine.
Okay. They're just well gel. That's
probably
what it is.
Mainly jealous of your seat.
Yeah. It's got my name on it. It's like a director's chair, this
Where's
one.
the name on it?
It's probably directly behind my head.
Did your mum sew it in?
No, I writ it in with
fabric tab.
I mean, I have had those in the past. They were pretty sick. Mine were in green.
Yeah,
they're very distinctive.
Nice.
And my other siblings had different colours, so obviously you knew whose was whose.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to make a little side note, and I don't want it to go on too long because it's quite a contentious matter, and I don't have a strong enough opinion to give about it that I want it to be a defining moment of our chat.
Oh right.
But we were talking about.
I'm interested now. I'm excited. This is.
Yeah, I've built it up, haven't I? So we were talking about child abuse, and we were so I know some people refuse to listen to Michael Jackson's music,
right,
as a result of the many allegations that have been made against him during his life and presumably afterwards as well.
Yeah,
and it's a very interesting balance whether you can make that with your conscience, as to whether you can make the switch between whatever happened in his personal life and what his resulting material in the music in his music ended up being, which in a lot of ways has not been repeated really in terms of popular music.
Right. Okay.
So it's kind of, can you make that switch? Can you almost switch off what has happened in his personal life to be able to actually appreciate what he's done in his music, or
Right.
or can you blindly just accept what may or may not have been talked about in the media?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But even if it was, I mean, when you say blindly accept what might be talked about, I mean, I don't know enough about with Michael Jackson. But even if there was like, even if things were proved and worse things were proved, even than what took place, then I suppose the question is, like, have you got a moral obligation to not listen to it, or is it just that when you listen to his music, it like associates things in your mind?
Yeah, and I think that's where the individual comes in, where they can, how they're built up as a person, whether they can almost turn on a kind of, whether they're able to do that or whether they're not. It's almost a I can't put a word on it, but I'm sure there is, just being able to switch at that association in your brain between what he may or may not have done and what he's produced artistically.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like, thinking about cancel culture more broadly. So like there, people might just say, I'm not going to listen to his music, I'm going to get rid of his CDs or whatever.
Yeah, that's like the whole book burning situation, isn't it? Like,
right, yeah. And then the question is, how much of a sinner does he have to be before you do that? Because everybody that we listen... So I don't know enough about the Michael Jackson thing, but everybody that we listen to, whether it be somebody speaking or musician or anything like that, they, even if you don't use the language of sin, they've done stuff wrong. Like, they're out of order. So, even somebody who wouldn't claim any kind of religious affiliation would say this was wrong, what this person did, or this person did, and everybody's done that. So the question, I suppose, it does raise that question of like, well,
could you listen to anything?
Yeah, that's it.
Almost.
Yeah, you only need to ask my kids or my wife to know that I can be an idiot and like that I can be wrong and sin. And so does that mean that people could never have anything to do with me
on a Sunday?
Well, yeah, that's it. Or like have anything to do with me, or say like go for a beer with me, or whatever it might be.
These things that you hold dear.
Yeah, that'll be a milkshake.
Nice.
Or a hot chocolate.
Head to the shake bar.
But it's true though. Like it's a form of excommunication in our culture, isn't it? Cancel culture. So, especially the Roman Catholic Church.
Shaming culture.
Yeah, that's it. And we're going to cut this person off. We're not going to have anything to do with them. And yet, it happens in a secular culture. When I say secular there, as in one that doesn't claim any religious affiliation, and yet still we have this desire to cut ourselves off from those which we and disassociate from those which we don't consider to be holy,
have done a heinous crime against
basically
humanity.
Yeah. Have you read have you heard of the book Dominion by Tom Holland?
No.
He's a historian. Anyway, he's
not the actor.
No, I don't know what he's in. What's he in? But I've heard the name.
Spider-Man, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, Tom Holland is definitely not in Spider-Man, but or the one I'm thinking of. Not this one. It traces out basically the history of Christianity and how this beaten down, apparently defeated Galilean teacher, his teachings and his claimed lordship spread around the whole globe. And basically, one of Tom Holland's points is that we all think like Christians. So, like our culture, doing cancel culture, is a manifestation of a culture which has done away with the language of like holiness. This isn't Tom Holland. This is just me thinking in terms of us being like Christians. That our culture is all. Our culture is one that's obviously done away with the idea of holiness, but at the same time we have a strong conception of holiness because we go, that is an unholy thing that we think Michael Jackson's done there, and so we're going to cut ourselves off from that unholy thing. Do you know what I mean? Or the thing that Tom Holland talks about is like with Charlie Hebdo and the shootings there, the awful stuff that happened in France.
Yeah.
How what you had there was people who essentially think like Christians. So in kind of Western democratic cultures, we essentially think in a broadly Christian manner with regards to our morality.
Christian manner.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Christianity is just Judaism come to its fulfillment, but yeah, they broadly think.
Yeah.
They broadly think like that in Western democracies because we're so shaped by Christianity, and then we're super shocked when we see a religion which had essentially a warlord at its helm, Islam, and they're absolutely shocked when somebody offends the prophet of Islam, the claimed prophet of Islam, and then people who are Muslims come in and kill them. And it's like Tom Holland's point really was that, well, we were shocked because we basically think like Christians. Tom Holland's not a Christian himself, but his point is that we essentially think like Christians.
What was it? What was the point he was trying to make? Was it that the shock was shocking in its own right?
Well, the thought that people would retaliate in that way for something that was drawn is
seemingly harmless.
Well, yeah, I think basically the Christian response to somebody doing something horrible like that is not to get a gun and go and shoot them. The Christian response is to love your enemy and do good to them. And which is that's a totally radical thing to do. And so in our culture we kind of go, as a result of the Christian influence that there's been, which Tom Holland traces out throughout his book, as a result of that Christian influence, we end up thinking that it's not the done thing to pick up a Kalashnikov and go and shoot everybody in a journalist's office. But that didn't occur because of secularism. Like, nobody went, there is no God, therefore we shouldn't kill our neighbour. Nobody ever thought that. That's not how it works. But instead, the Christian view of the world, of loving your neighbour, even when your neighbour says something wrong, stupid, offensive, or whatever it might be, has gone so deep within our culture that we don't even realise that we're kind of thinking through that lens. Does that make sense?
I can see what you're trying to get at. Yeah.
Because it's like, so basically we're from what I remember of what Tom Holland wrote, we're kind of a nation of people who broadly think with the morality of Christians, although as a nation we've done, and as Western democracy we've done away with the God of the Bible. Now that's absolutely disastrous long term to the presumption that it's good to be kind to people, and that we should care for the weak and the downtrodden and those kind of things, or we should forgive people. That it's actually disastrous to do away with the God of the Bible, because if you give it long enough, you won't cling on to those kind of moral imperatives that we think are great.
Very easily, just kind of each kind of pillar just kind of crumbles away.
Yeah, it all crumbles away, and
when it doesn't have a basis, a foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because the idea that you forgive your enemies rather than killing your enemies, that needs a metaphysical foundation. You can't look at the world, the created world, and go, I should love my enemies rather than killing my enemies. You can't get there from, I've done some experiments and I've observed the world around me, and I've decided that it's clear scientifically that it's better to love my enemies rather than killing them. You don't get there at all. You need something from outside. Do you know what I mean? You need a metaphysical foundation.
Why should I do this? It's nice to do that. Well, why should I really do it then? Well, let's not do it.
Yeah,
that kind of. That's a shortened sequence of what might be the case, but it very easily stands to reason that you can get sidetracked and miss the ideology behind loving your neighbour and any of the other teachings of God.
Yeah, totally. And you only get to have that loving your neighbour thing, I think, if it's actually rooted in something real in time and space, as in the God of the Bible who has loved his neighbour through sending his son to lay down his life on behalf of like rebellious sinners. Like that's the love that exemplifies it all, and that's the basis for it. But when if all we're in is a material world, then it makes no sense to love your neighbour. And even though people might appeal for it, or for us to love one another or be kind to each other, it really is just a sentimentality. It's just a feeling, and you do, like you say, just so what? You might as well just end up with that.
And for a lot of people, it's kind of well, this is what my parents have done, and this is what my grandparents have done, and this is something that I would like to, or I feel as though I should carry on with. Having a good relationship with your neighbours, it's just nice, isn't it? That kind of a feeling to know that you're keeping up with the comings and goings of your people who are geographically close to you.
Yeah, that's it. And sometimes it's just that. It's just what I've been brought up with. Sometimes people appeal to that. It's just what I know. It's just I've been brought up in that way. Well, it's like, so what? Or it's the law of the land. Well, it's not the law of the land at the moment in the UK that you need to love your neighbour as yourself, is it? No. That in itself, not that radical sense, or like forgive your enemies. That's certainly not the law. There are broader outworkings of that within our culture. Certainly, love your neighbour as yourself. Like, don't speed, because you might run people over. So, so it's all built upon that imperative. But certainly, forgiving your enemy, that's not in law. I remember seeing a film years ago that I tried to look up, but I couldn't find it anywhere on like Netflix or anything. It's called SFW.
Okay.
So this is a family show, so I can't say the whole name, but the film is called So Effing What.
Sure.
That's what the SFW is, okay?
Okay, yeah.
And I watched it when I was a teenager. It's from ages ago, and so I don't remember everything, but as far as I can remember, some people get locked, I think, in a shop, and there's a kind of a hostage situation.
Okay.
And
can you remember who was in it?
No, it's pretty fringe, and there wouldn't be anybody famous.
No Hollywood actors.
No, well, there might have been, but like early ones, I can't remember. But
sure.
But basically, one of the main protagonists in the film ends up kind of confounding the hostage takers or the people who are in control by just going SFW, as in I don't care, like what you do or say. So what? So essentially, just questioning everything. So if it's like, I'm going to shoot you, they're just like, SFW. So what? And if you actually apply that kind of logic to things, like so, and you question things or do what, it's kind of a form of what you do when you're a kid. When you say why, it's like why, why should I share that with my brother or sister? Why shouldn't I punch them? Why? It's almost that kind of thing.
Why shouldn't I take that away and just play with it by myself?
Yeah, that's it. And so if you apply the kind of thinking that they had in there, because everybody just assumes you have to be scared of, like, in a hostage situation. It's like, well, no, I don't. And it's the same when it comes to a culture. Like, you should care for your neighbour. Well, why should I? SFW. Why should I care about them at all? You shouldn't punch people as you walk down the street. Well, so what? Thanks for saying that, but I don't care.
It's not how I say hello to people generally.
Well, no.
And I hope it isn't yourself either.
And then if somebody says, yeah, well, nobody will be friends with you if you do that, well, it's like, well, so what? I don't care. So do we do things just so that people will be friends with us? So does that mean that if I was to punch somebody, because it would mean that a load of other people would be friends with me, then the morally right action is that I should punch people?
I mean, that's a kind of, it's trying to catch you out there.
It's SFW.
A moral loophole there that you've managed to work into this.
But I think just being willing to ask that question of why should I do that? Why should I kind of fall in line with what people are saying? What it does is it reveals how we make all these assumptions about stuff, and we don't actually have to do stuff just because our society says so, and it's not actually the basis for everything. Does that make sense?
Can you give an example, or is it just
okay.
generalisation?
So at the moment, it's seen as there are sectors in society who would say that if I don't fully embrace a man saying that he's a woman and identifying himself as a woman, that I'm being hateful or bigoted or being harmful to him.
Transphobic.
Yeah, transphobic, absolutely. So then the question is, like, well, why? And why is it a problem to be hateful or to be bigoted or to be transphobic?
Or
I'm not
to be.
Well, no, let's just go even those things in themselves. What's your problem with that? So I don't think that I'm in any sense transphobic. I don't hate people who, like the guy who says that he's a woman or anything like that. I would disagree that his greatest joy is going to be found in that way. I don't think that's the case at all. But what's the problem with being hateful? What? So what? And it's like, well,
the perception
why,
of being seen as hateful. Yeah,
why should I love that person? And if people can't answer that question, like why should I love them? Why should I embrace them? Then there's a bit of an issue, isn't there? And yet everybody just presumes that we should just love people and care for them.
Yeah, I mean it only goes so far as a means to being able to loving and caring as a means of loving and caring for people.
How do you mean?
Well, it's a sense of what do you or I or someone else perceive to be as a loving and caring action, basically, and
right.
How does that then get perceived, and
so
does that mean that someone is going to get a warning at work or get shamed on the internet or get imprisoned or something?
So in terms of what is a loving action towards the other person, you mean?
Yeah,
totally. So because I was thinking on the basis of like, why should you be loving at all? Because that can just be presumed, can't it?
That's true. Yeah. What gives us the basis to feel as though that is a justifiable action?
Yeah. Why do I have to? Apart from the Christian worldview, I don't have a real consistent basis of loving my neighbour as myself.
You could probably get as far as it's just nice, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I was brought up this way, or the law of the land says this or that. But those are so subjective, aren't they? And again, SFW onto those. So what? With some slightly explicit language in between, But yeah, you're right though. In terms of what constitutes being loving as well, that's the other side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. It's what subtext you're giving out, basically, in any given situation where you're showing love to someone. How you're showing that through your actions, through your words, and there's definitely room for misinterpretation there along the way.
Yeah, well, totally. Yeah, because I mean, I think a lot of Christians would say, and that they should do. I think this is the right position, that we should speak the truth in love. So we shouldn't deceive ourselves to tell people what they want to hear, and that's actually a very unloving thing to do that, or to continue to deceive them. So if somebody's in a form of self-deceit, the best bet is to tell them the truth, but do it in a loving manner, and try to maintain that relationship, that friendship, while you do that. But again, we have to assume that love is good, don't we?
Yeah. So I remember being in a locker room in a gym once, and I remember being privy to a conversation where there was a couple of guys, and one of them was talking about how he was so he must have had another girlfriend, and he was talking about how he was seeing someone else on the side, and how he was just basically talking about how he was kind of saying, oh well, I'm going to see this girl later, but then I'm going to go back to my girlfriend, or that sort of thing. And yeah, I mean, I was obviously internally I was kind of a bit seething, even though I don't know this person.
Yeah.
And as much as anything, I was mad at the fact that his friend was just implicitly going along with it. His friend wasn't in any way questioning the morality behind his friend's judgment.
Yeah.
His lifestyle at that particular point.
Yep.
And yeah, that kind of goes to the point of how much of a friend are you to someone when you're not pointing them away from a lifestyle which is at best shady, at the worst devastating for whoever happens to be involved in that particular web.
Yeah, totally.
I really just, one thing I really wanted to say to that bloke at that point was just like, you are going to get found out at some point. I really just felt like piping up and saying, I've overheard what you've been talking about, and this isn't going to last. You need to quit while you're ahead.
I suppose there's also the side of it as well as like that's going to blow up in that guy's face. There must be a reason why we or anybody else might see it as wrong. So like presumably his girlfriend would see it as wrong. But then let's strip everything back, because we just think like Christians all the time, and that guy will have been as well, and his girlfriend, and just we all do. Because if we strip it back and we just go, all that guy is a bag of skin and bone and sperm, and he's trying to perpetuate his family line, because that's what all animals do.
Great.
And
cool.
Then all he's doing is sowing his wild oats. And his family line is going to go to 2 females there, or be worked out through 2 females rather than 1, which from an evolutionary basis is
presumably
advantageous.
Yes.
Yeah. And so
that somehow he has every right to be able to find the best mate.
Yeah, why not? Until we then go, yeah, but faithfulness is important. It's like, well, where did that concept of faithfulness come from? We're just talking about procreation here and like survival of the fittest. Where, the faithfulness element, where does that come from? But the girlfriend will definitely almost certainly have a problem with him playing the field, and rightly so. And as a Christian, I go, yes, because you are made in the image of a faithful God, and that guy's made in the image of a faithful God, but actually he's playing out a deceitful version of the faithful God, a distorted, twisted version, which is unfaithful.
He's being deceitful to both of you.
Yeah, and not faithful to whatever kind of checks he's cashed with his mouth, whatever he said, like, say,
you're the only one in my life.
Exactly, that's it. You're the girl for me. Very possibly, I love you. All those kind of things, which when God says those things, he's faithful. He doesn't ever go back on his promises. But that guy's gone against that. But again, that whole concept of faithfulness, you don't get that in a purely material world. You just get matter in motion, and it just is what it is. And if that guy's the stronger one and he can just sow his wild oats as far afield as possible, more power to him. That's all you've got.
If.
Oh, totally. But we're so like,
I'm just getting sucked into what you're saying, Andy. That's all.
Yeah,
properly.
And that's it. I've thought this for years, like, but it's only become more clear in the last 10 years probably, when I've spent a little bit more time thinking about it.
the clarity of human morality and how that plays out.
Yeah, and that without the God of the Bible, you have no consistent basis for it, and that people are constantly operating out of the presumption of a lawgiver, and out of the presumption of some kind of holiness, even if they do away with him.
Yeah.
You got a ladybird?
Yeah. Nice little orange one. Might just fly away at some point. Just tumble off. That's fair enough.
Should I check the cameras and see if they're still recording?
I mean, that would be pretty disastrous
so
at this point if it was all. It would just be a dead cut at this point.
Oh, it's still recording. That's amazing.
Yeah, and mine as well.
I think so. Yeah, incredibly. Your screen is super bright.
Yeah, it'll probably be on full. Yeah.
Yeah, I turned down the brightness on mine. I thought, man, maybe that could contribute to overheating. But
yeah, possibly.
Yeah. Still feel quite full of barbecue. Anyway,
it's nice when you don't have to worry about your tea, isn't it? You can just kind of carry on from one meal and just let that almost be your next meal.
Yeah, I'm not going to eat much for tea, I don't think.
No.
That halloumi burger was... Because I said, can I have one of those burgers, as in a beef burger, and then Emily put some... Oh no, she already had some halloumi burgers on.
She put the halloumi on, didn't she? And
yeah.
Then you were just like, oh well, I'll just have that instead.
I'd already said, okay, this is the last burger I'm having, referring to the beef burger, and then I was like, is that halloumi? And she was like, they're halloumi burgers. So technically, you can't have that either. I'm like, well. So I had
I am going to one up you.
That's it. So a halloumi burger with a beef burger, which was great. It was nice. But I'm pretty full now.
We're pretty screwed up as guys, aren't we? Whenever we're told that we can't do something, we'll always give it a good go.
Even if you hadn't told me that I couldn't have done it, I would have still liked it. But
no, that's cool.
I am vaguely trying to be a bit more healthy at the moment, so it's
yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy. I saw a program where the amount of processed food that we have now compared to even just the 80s
right.
is quite astounding, really.
Right.
The shift in balance between having fresh food versus processed food.
Yeah.
I think it might have been like 60% fresh food, 20% processed food, and 20% whatever else.
Oh my word.
In the 80s.
Right.
Versus like maybe 60% processed food now.
Wow.
30 or 40% fresh food.
That's scary, isn't it?
And that's just happened in a generation.
Mm. Yeah, totally.
There's been it's so easy. That's going to be a big contributing factor to anyone who's keen on keeping in shape.
Yeah, that's crazy. It's so easy to go to the fridge though, isn't it, and like pick up a yogurt or a...
So easy.
Like when I say yogurt, I mean a chocolate mousse.
one of those solid in a pot chocolate bars.
Yeah, that's it. Or yeah, that's it. It's a chocolate bar with loads of air in it. It's a mousse.
Yum.
Or like a pepperami, one of those things. Because our kids eat those, and like they're just too easy to eat when I'm in a rush. So
full of that protein that you crave.
Yeah, well, oh my word, we went for a walk yesterday up in the Forest of Bowland, Sarah and the kids and I and the doggo, and we had some like mackerel. It was really nice, smoked mackerel, but just 2 bits of this smoked mackerel had 47% of your salt intake. And then we did some looking at it, and like just one of these they're like Aldi's own pepperamis, like I don't know what they call them, like a meat stick or something. I don't know what they are, but I think the kids call them a salami sausage. One of those was like that on its own was about the same as a whole bit of fish, so about 25% of your daily intake of salt, which is pretty crazy, isn't it? Really,
just a wee little We love
no,
sausage
like
then.
like this length.
The regulars.
But like they're quite thin.
I know I know the ones.
Yeah.
Don't you just love the names of Aldi products though? That they're just so blatantly taking after other famous food products.
Yeah, because there's like is it Nutella?
So
is it Nutoka or something like that?
It could be, yeah.
I can't remember.
Instead of Lurpak, you've got Nordpak.
Yeah, which is nice.
It is good, yeah.
The salted one.
Instead of Mars bars, you've got Titan bars.
Yes. Is that Aldi?
I think so.
Clearly an Aldi shopper.
Yeah, I go most weeks.
Do you?
Yeah.
That's Sarah's preferred.
I'm down. I'm down with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when I lived in Penrith when I was at university, and we used to go to Morrison's like sometimes 3 times a day because we lived
really?
we lived on a little housing area which was like which was literally about 200 to 300 meters away from Morrison's where we lived.
Cool.
So it was just so easy. You just walked over the railway bridge and you were there at Morrison's. But because Morrison's would do reduced food as well, like clearance stuff at the end of the day.
Oh yeah.
So
yellow sticker stuff.
Yeah. It's not as good as it used to be back then, but we used to have a lot of stuff back then.
So you'd always hit it up like an hour or two before closing.
Before closing time, yeah. Being skint students.
Get yourself 10p pastries.
Yeah.
That kind of business.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Probably cheap meat and stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't go down that route now. It's not worth it for your belly.
No. Well, that's it,
in terms of the digestion of the meat.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But that's one of those things you could just go... You know, because within our... And this is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because this is, I think, a little bit more taste-based. Why is it important to look after your body? Like, why is that important? And sometimes as well, I think people can have like a disgust towards people who don't look after their bodies. Like, that's a horrible thing. You don't look after this because you do whatever. You maybe don't do any exercise, or you have these habits that lead to you being like that. But it's like, well, why? Why is it? Why should they look after their body? And again, as a Christian, I go, well, I've got an answer to that totally. Like, our bodies are given to us by God, and we're entrusted with them, and they're a gift, and so we want to look after it on that basis. They are a
temple.
Yeah, that's it, and we want to glorify God in our bodies. But if we just matter in motion, and there's anyway, I just keep going.
You can
keep thinking back
so easily
at this worldview level. It's just so relevant, because I suppose somebody could say, how could somebody respond to that? Well, they might say, well,
it's your own business, mate.
Well, yeah, they might say that, yeah. But they might say, well, it's conducive to the good of the human race to look after your body.
To keep lasting.
Yeah. But then somebody could rightly answer, well, who says that the good of the human race is the goal?
Living.
Yeah, maybe just me. Maybe me and my pleasure is the goal here. And I want to get as much pleasure as I can right now. So why should I care about anybody else?
Well, that's taking a more qualitative stance of the human race, which is probably a little bit nearer to the gospel message.
How do you mean?
As in your quality of life and what you're able to, what is pleasure and how do you obtain that?
Okay.
As opposed to your own health and how you are as a person, your levels of fitness, whatever. Just how that kind of then transfers to actually what are the reasons that I am, what are the reasons that I'm living, and how does that then what that's based on. Is that based on a quantitative process or a qualitative?
I'm sorry, I got distracted by a squirrel over your shoulder.
Squirrel!
It was just hopping. I was like, what on earth is that?
Oh my.
Sorry, mate.
A red squirrel.
I don't know.
It won't be a red squirrel.
He's not even climbed. Well, he hasn't climbed up this side of the tree anyway. Sorry, would you like to reiterate that point? Or?
It could kind of go either way, really. We've got a quantitative basis of being able to prove God in his existence, but God wants us to live. He wants us to be happy, and he wants us to live a life that is full of joy. And so yeah, it kind of works both ways, really.
Okay. That squirrel really took me out of that conversation. I'm sorry, mate.
I can tell. I can tell.
It only took a little tail flipping up like that. Yeah.
I mean, they are pretty. I can tell why dogs kind of get a bit distracted by them. The squirrel mafia.
Little furry things running around. Alfie doesn't tend to chase them very much now, but
Don Squirrelione.
yeah.
Wherever it has gone.
Don't know. Right. Is it home time?
Probably. I think we've probably been chatting for at least 40 minutes at this point.
It was 45 when I checked the camera earlier.
Ah, nice.
Yeah. Social distance, guys. High five, etc. So good job, man.
Yeah. We know how to do the chat.
We'll have to wait for all the abuse about the sound quality. Again, it's the trees because we're in nature, which is nice. But
people like views.
But also, obviously, our total hack use of lav mics. But if anybody wants to buy us a nicer mic, feel free. But for now, this is what we've got.
We're just waiting for all the advertising money to come in.
Yeah, that's it. Many millions, no doubt. Cool, man.